Welcome to this episode of the Modern Day Missionaries podcast, and welcome to our very first ever panel we've had here on the podcast. I'm joined today by two couples, Uva and Madonna, Bryce and Amanda, and together the five of us talk about our journeys of parenting children with special needs on the mission field. We talk about the really funny parts, because you know there's a lot of those, and some of the huge challenges, those as well, and how we each navigated those. And it's interesting because we've got these three distinct stories, but there are parallels running through each one of them. So I believe that you're going to be able to relate no matter what your story is as well. And you're going to love these two couples. They get super raw and honest. We all do. Let's be real. You're going to see. But also it's very encouraging, helpful. There's a lot of great takeaways I think you'll have from it as well. And you're going to love these two couples as much as I did. So with that, let's dive in to today's episode. Uva, Madonna, Bryce, Amanda, welcome to the Modern Day Missionaries podcast. We are so glad to have you today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
So this is the largest group of guests we have ever had. So these are some challenges we're going to work through. There are four of you, so there's five of us talking, and so we're also politely trying to give each other chances. So I'm going to try and make it easy so we can flow really well today and have fun. But we're talking about a subject that is very near and dear to our hearts, and I'm guessing it's very near and dear to our listeners. If you have clicked on this episode, then you probably are the parent or loved one of a child with special needs, or it's a topic that's important on your heart. And so we've got these two couples here today, and this is their life journey as well. And I'm just so excited to mine from you guys your real life experience of being on the field and having kids with special needs. So I'd love to just kick it off by having each of you share just briefly about your kids with special needs. What are their names? What are their ages? And what are some of the challenges or disabilities that they have?
So we have 7 kids at home, and our littlest ones, they both have Down syndrome, and their names are Rusk and Sutter, and they just turned 5. They're a week apart, and they're kind of the favorites of everybody.
That's fair to say.
So I feel like they're pretty spoiled and just so loved. But yeah, they're such gifts. So grateful for them.
And Uva, Madonna, how about you?
So we have 3 kids in total. And our daughter with special needs, her name is Matea, and she's 21, almost 22. And she has a chromosomal deletion called Cat's-Pride syndrome, or 5p minus. So she's cognitively about 2, 3, or 4 years old, depending on the day. Yeah. And her mood.
Yeah. Her mood. Yeah, we were just kind of talking about this beforehand because we were saying, I was like, oh, our little kids. And then I was like, wait, okay. Like in your guys' case and in my case, our kids are in their 20s, but they're still just our little people. They're these, I call her my big little kid. Yeah. It's both somehow at the same time. So, and we've all been or are still doing missions. So Uva, Madonna, you guys are still serving on the field. Where are you serving?
We're in Taiwan.
And how long have you guys been there for?
We moved here in 2006, after being in China for a few years before that.
Long time. And Bryce and Amanda, you guys were on the field, was it 15 years?
Yes, we served for 15 years in the Caribbean region between Haiti, St. Vincent, and Barbados.
So I'd love to ask you guys, like Uva and Madonna, what's something that caught you off guard about raising a child with special needs in another country? Maybe something you just didn't see coming.
Well, first off, Matea was born in China and wasn't diagnosed until she was 10 months old. So by the time she was diagnosed, we didn't know any different. So I don't know how raising a child in America is like, because we've never done it. I've never raised a child or a child with special needs. So I can't compare it to any other country. So it's kind of hard to do that. I think the biggest thing was when we moved from China to Taiwan, just that God provided exactly what she needed at the right time, has always been the answer for everything. But also just, I think he's led us in ways that when we came to do an interview, because my husband was a principal and was interviewing for a principal position at a school, we met a family that we knew, and their son had the same exact feeding tube that Matea had. So just tiny little gifts like that, a glimmer of like, yeah, this is the right this is the right way. Not saying signs, because I don't really like that word, but just little glimmers of like, yes, hope for me. I think peace for my heart to know that it was the right decision.
And then Bryce and Amanda, your journey was an adoption one. So you invited children into your family knowing they had special needs, correct?
Yes, yeah. So we had our son. He was a surprise when we were on the field, and that brought so much just, I don't know, all of, at least where we were in the Caribbean, there was so much different beliefs of, okay, well, I did something wrong, is kind of, instead of, I mean, we know they're a gift and want to celebrate them, but it was all this pressure of people kept wanting to inform me that I had done something wrong, that I'd eaten something, that I hadn't taken care of myself, that it was the paint that I was around, I must have been, or something. And so with his birth, it kind of felt like we had all this pressure on the field of, you did something wrong. But then with our son, we adopted him after we moved off the field from a European country. And then it was the total opposite, because the people still felt that way. But when we were in Serbia getting him, everybody was just like, wow, I can't believe that you would take in a family with special needs. And they just wanted to hear, and it wasn't a guilt thing, or it wasn't a you did something wrong. It was a, this is amazing, and wanting to hear more about families that do that. So it was kind of, I feel like we got to see both sides of it.
Yeah, I love that you guys brought up that shame element too, because that's real. Like Uva and Madonna, did you guys experience that? People blaming or acting like it was something that you did that caused your child's disability?
I feel like because we're foreigners, they didn't expect her to have anything wrong with her, if that makes any sense. Like when they would see us down the street, they just thought, oh, she's just really small, she must be a baby. Or as she got older, they don't see it until she starts talking to them, and she's nonverbal, so her words don't come out correctly. And then they think, oh, she's just speaking English, because they maybe don't understand English. And then that's when it comes out. And then they think, oh, that's really odd. So as a foreigner, I don't think they always see it. And then as a Christian or a missionary, we've had pastors come up and ask my husband, why would God do this to you? I don't understand. Your parents were missionaries. You're missionaries. Why would God do it? So it's brought some really good conversation. So yes, we have experienced that, but not such a negative. But I do know that it's here in this area, in this part of the world as well. But I haven't experienced it. Have you?
No, I tend to think too, though, that the shame, guilt, or whichever culture it falls in, I think it's as prevalent in Western cultures as it is in Asian cultures. I can't speak to Latin cultures. I have no idea. I really have no experience in Latin cultures. But even in North America and Western Europe, I think it's just phrased a little bit differently. I think it's kind of a pity, and make sure you let the government take over very quickly to give you everything you need. And so I think that's more of a human condition rather than a cultural issue, that there is, for those who aren't continuously exposed to individuals with special needs, there's just no reference point. And so it's helped me to be very gracious, because they just don't know and they don't have the exposure. And then you always have to try to fit your experience into a framework that you already have set in your head. And if there's no framework, then I think it's as much an issue in Western's hard to say, Western European and North American cultures.
And that's a great point as to if you've been exposed to it before or not, certainly. Because you're right. I mean, I've experienced it. Our daughter was here until she was 8, and then we moved when she was 8. So I've done living in the U.S., a child with special needs, the whole birthing process here, and then also going overseas. And Madonna, to your point, I do think you're right. I had not thought about it till you just said it, that a foreigner experience is probably a little bit different, because there is an extra grace that you get sometimes, not in all cultures, but in some, and they don't know. Like you said, like our daughter had halting English. Well, they didn't know that. Unless we're an English speaker, they're not necessarily going to pick up on all those things. So that's interesting. We definitely felt the guilt and shame here in the US, but it wasn't necessarily, it depended on the group of people you're with, kind of like you were saying, Uva. I think there are some places where people don't know what to think, and so they do blame it, and it's something you did, and it's hidden sin, and then there are other people who it's not a big deal at all. But I will speak. You mentioned you weren't hadn't seen it as much in Latin culture, or you hadn't been exposed in Latin American culture, and that's where I was, and we were did not experience it to the same degree, but we used to partner with a couple to do retreats and kind of workshops for parents of kids with special needs, and the guilt there put on parents. Oh my gosh, it was awful. I mean, they thought certainly it was something they'd done, and so they walked around carrying that guilt, and it ended up manifesting in their parenting. So much shame, and sometimes it would come out in the way they disciplined their kids or treated them, or just even the way you were with your kid. I remember when I used to feel guilty when our daughter was younger. I didn't relax with her the same way. I don't feel like I embraced her the same way that I did once God's grace came in and lifted that from me. So there's so many factors. Culture is one, but there's so many other. And now you guys have a ministry, Uva and Madonna, Taiwan Sunshine, where you work with families with children with disabilities. So what are some of the things you've seen with those families?
Playing space.
It really depends, even within Taiwan, your socioeconomic level, your different regional cultures. And so really we see a lot of the shame here as well. We see a lot of the isolation, keeping kids out of the community. It's easy to say that's shame. Part of that's also just exhaustion. So it's really a physical need, not just a cultural issue. It's very much an expert culture. And so what I mean by that is that unless you are an expert in a certain field, then you can't really do much in that field. So meaning that, unless you're a trained therapist, you can't really help kids on a sports day, or unless you're a trained special ed teacher, you really don't know how to help them in the classroom. And so there's kind of an avoidance and kind of handing over to someone who has more expertise than you do. And so we again, it's hard to compare, because I think the common cultural element, what supersedes culture, is actually, in our case, I say the shared suffering of having a child with special needs. And that's the immediate bond. That's a stronger bond than a cultural bond. And so that's what we've noticed here again and again and again, that even though as we connect in these communities and we don't always connect with their culture, the thing that immediately opens the door for us, if Matea comes along for any of the things we do, then there's no cultural barrier. But there is, if not, there is that reluctance of actually talking about that you have a child with special needs. It's always minimized. They're always going to be okay. In Christian communities here especially, it's always the idea of, well, if you can just pray a little bit more, give a little bit more, do a little bit more, confess a little bit more, have a little bit more faith, have a little bit more donations, have a little bit more extra service, then God will eventually fix your child. And so when that doesn't happen, then I think that leads to a real crisis in faith. So that's kind of what we're sensing here. The guilt, shame, yes, it's there. The avoidance is there. The handing over to experts is here. And then in the Christian setting, it's a crisis of faith when you've been told what you need to do to fix your child, and then you do it and it doesn't happen. And again, that's all over the world. Yeah. That's not a Taiwanese cultural thing. I think that's a global human condition again. So.
Well, and I like that you mentioned it that way, because we have missionaries listening from all over the world to this. Mm-hmm. And there are things that they're going to have in common. And like you said, that's a global piece. I remember that. I had a book of scripture verses when I was pregnant, because they suspected beforehand. And I would declare them every single morning. And then after she was born, which we just couldn't even believe that she had something, was born with something, we were just blown away, because we thought it would just be healed through our brilliant faith-filled efforts. again, just going through that book and reading the verses, declaring and feeling like if you just got good enough or did enough, or that it would somehow make it better. And it was oppressive because I grew up in a faith environment, and it's wonderful to have faith and belief for healing. That's an amazing thing. And it's awful when it gets in the way of loving your own kid the way God designed you to. And that was what it did for me. I mean, I didn't give up on faith. I believe God has an amazing plan for her life, whatever that looks like. But I had to let go of a lot of things because it was keeping me from loving her well. So that's really powerful. And I like that you're getting into kind of some of that emotional space, some of the feelings behind it, because it is a shared suffering. And as Christians, it's like, oh my gosh, are we saying our kids are causing us suffering? Okay, first of all kids cause all parents suffering. Like, we caused our parents suffering. I mean, and joys. So yes, our kids are amazing. Yes, they're joyful. Yes, God has great things for them. And it's really hard. So like Bryce and Amanda, you interestingly birthed a child with special needs and adopted a child with special needs. I'd love to hear about the emotional piece that you went through in that. Like, what did you feel like with the birth? And then how did you get to the point where you're like, let's do this again on purpose this time?
Well, we kind of share, as a part of that, you know, we didn't know when we were pregnant with Rusk. And again, he was our sixth. And then when he was born, I mean, God made wives and moms with such a unique sense. I mean, immediately she just, I think he has Down syndrome. And I was like, pump the brakes. It's okay. No, I'm sure that you're just overreacting or something. And he did, and we didn't know. And it just, honestly, it just really opened our hearts to, okay, what does this look like? And we started learning more about in the world and needs of kids all over the world with disabilities. And so it just started us on that unique journey, and what a blessing that was. And so, for a long time, for us where we were serving, we just had the opportunity to be around orphan children a lot, and we welcome them into our homes. And each time my wife would look at me and say, hey, we should adopt. And I was very reluctant, very resistant to that. And was like, I think we're good. I think we're okay. And so each place where we were serving, our family kept growing until, and I just didn't want to do that. And eventually after Rusk was born, I finally was like, hey, I think we should adopt. I think God's really been working on my heart. And Amanda's response was like, you wait till after 6 kids to now want to adopt. And so, and yeah, it just started us on that, that beautiful journey. But it was just a different set of emotions that kind of went with that. And so information that you receive from, from the country and about the child. And then when you actually meet, when we met Sutter, was very different than what was communicated to us. And so it was quite the journey.
Yeah, I bet. What was that like for you, Amanda?
I was probably a little different than Bryce. Like, I had sadly I had avoided kids with special needs all my life. I am so ashamed to say that. When we would go to orphanages, I would play with all the kids, and the ones I didn't play with were the ones that, were in the corner and neglected and had the special needs. And I wish I could go back, because now those would be the first kids I'd want to, go hold and play with, and that aren't picked up. But I don't know. I didn't feel comfortable, I guess. And so when he was born, it was really hard. Bryce was great and just like, okay. And just, from the minute he came, I was scared, and it took me a little while. And even the thought of, we felt God leading us to adopt him, but it was still scary. And even at the last minute when we got him, kind of Bryce said, our first son was born blind and just has a lot of extra needs besides just Down syndrome. So when we saw Sutter's chart, it was really easy to be like, okay, he has Down syndrome, but he, the reports were all but he can talk, he can do this, he can do this. So I thought, wow, he's just, this is gonna be so easy. And then when we got him, he was completely, he was having seizures and drugged, and he couldn't even at 2.5 lift his head up or sit up. He's, still hasn't learned how to walk, and we don't know if he will. And, he can't talk. And so just everything they had said, it was just, I'm thankful that we didn't know all that, because I think when we were looking at him and when they had brought him to, that it would have been this checklist of, this is too overwhelming, we can't do it. But I'm so thankful because we have him now, and I'm so glad we do.
And thanks for your honesty and sharing that. Just even what you shared a second ago about you weren't drawn to the kids with special needs in the beginning. I mean, I wasn't either, if I can be honest. I think probably many parents aren't. Maybe some are, and how cool. If that's your story, that's amazing. God prepared you in a special way. But I think so many of us in life, the things that come our way, we aren't prepared for them at all. And just that feeling of overwhelm, like you said, when Sutter finally came into your home. I mean, if I could say the number of times that I have just broken down, during our journey. Yeah. And I said, Lord, you picked the wrong parent. I don't feel equipped for this. I don't feel like I have what I take. Sometimes I've seen her with my mom, who's just like the Energizer Bunny. And I'm like, Lord, my mom was supposed to be the mom. It's that feeling of insufficiency when you look at your child's needs sometimes. And then recognizing, no, God knows what he's doing, and he equips us with what we feel like we don't have. Uva and Madonna have when is a moment where you felt like, this is too much, I'm overwhelmed, I don't know if I can keep going forward?
Yesterday.
Ah,
My mom.
Thank you.
We were traveling in a different city, and our room at the guest room wasn't ready yet. And so I thought, oh no, it'll be great. We'll just go to a coffee shop, and I have her iPad. She'll watch her iPad show. We'll eat some lunch. I'll do a quick thing on my computer. And we got lunch eaten, and then she just basically had a meltdown. She was ready for a nap. And I thought, can I get us back to the place where the guest house is, and please let there be a key. I'm about to have a meltdown, because she was angry. So yesterday I was like, I can't do this. So, but God provided. I think it was ready, and she could take a nap when we got there. But that 5-10 minutes, I thought, I'm not going to make it.
You know what? This reminds me of what you guys said earlier too, about the bonding over the suffering piece, which sounds heavy, but it's real. I remember when we were invited to this retreat at WindShape. It's the marriage foundation, or the family and marriage foundation of Chick-fil-A. And it was for parents of children with special needs. And we got invited. It was the first one they'd ever done. And this couple was leading it. They're now good friends. They're amazing, Brad and Karen and Thompson. And we go in, and we're all sitting around the table, and everyone really knows each other. And they're like, so tell us about your kids. And one of the parents was like, he's like, tell us what's going on with your kids. And one of the parents goes, oh, what is their special superpower, super abilities? I don't, it was something very a super sweet, and she was the sweetest thing ever. This kind of Christian way of describing things. And he did this on purpose to shake us all up. He goes, no, what's wrong with your kid? And we were I think no one's ever talked this way. But it was this funny moment of levity where we could all just be like, okay, yeah. And everybody got to swap stories. And at first you could tell everybody felt a little awkward and a little guilty. Do I say these things about my kid? But it led to laughing. It led to crying and these bonding moments. And I remember too, I had a principal growing up, the principal of our school, and he had a daughter with some significant special needs. And he would tell the funniest stories on her, never in a mocking or mean way, just in a hilarious way. And it really, that freed me up, seeing people I loved and respected, being able to talk about the fun things and the faith things and the good things God has for their life, and laugh about the crazy things our kids do and the times we want to pull our hair out. it's like, just to be able to say that feels good. So thanks for Donna for saying yesterday, because that's real. It's real.
She's happy until she's not. And that's kind of what I tell them.
Okay, so I want to talk about ministry and missions and this parenting right now. So we've got this side of us, we're on the mission field. We've got this calling. We're following this path God has for us. And then we've got kids with special needs. And it sometimes feels like those two things are pulling us in opposite directions. In those moments for you guys, how have you been able to figure out what God is asking of you in those moments? Uva and Madonna, how about you guys?
So what we do right now is actually a direct result of Matea being diagnosed. And then when we moved to Taiwan, just seeing some of the needs in the community after we were here. And so both of us used to be teachers in international Christian schools. I was a principal in several international schools in Asia. And then, so that was kind of the track that we were on, especially when we were living in China, just because of language, culture, all of that was such a good fit for us. And then moving here was difficult because the hard part there was letting go of the dream of doing what we wanted to do in China. But then I was a principal here for several years, and what we do then kind of came out of interacting with the community here. And so it kind of shifted that we dropped one area of ministry and then shifted to the next one because of Matea. I shouldn't say because of Matea, but just through interacting with people and seeing different people and seeing what some of the needs are, and then also feeling like it was time for me to stop being a school principal in the international schools. And so the tension, the conflict, I think for us, it wasn't so much that, because it just kind of naturally led from one focus into another focus. And then that kind of was, I think maybe made that a little bit easier looking back about how God orchestrated all of that. At the moment, I think it was really hard because I think the thing that a lot of people don't talk about or aren't aware of, that having a child with special needs isn't just a loss of our dreams for the child, but it's a loss of our dreams as well, because the adjustments that you have to make, some of them career, some of them lifestyle, some of them empty nest, some of those types of things that are just such a big change and a loss of our dreams as well. As far as the calling piece and the kids, and as far as it being in conflict, I think that we've run into enough missionaries who struggle with the family ministry conflict with kids who don't have special needs. So again, I don't know that's specific to special needs. Of course, there's elements that are very, very different, but I think that the thing for me, I can only speak for myself, to learn is that, the benchmarks, the success, the measure of success, whether I have a child with special needs or not, is never, how many, how great did I do? How many things did I do? How much did I do? How successful was I? It's always, was I faithful and was I obedient? Those are the two, those are the only two benchmarks, being faithful and being obedient, and not any of these indexes that a lot of organizations like to use. And so, faithful and obedient is defined differently, in my opinion, when we have a child with special needs. So that, but it's a struggle, I think, for all missionaries, especially for men, when you kind of might feel helpless in a culture and you got to have some level of success. I think that's hard then to accept that you can't do what you wanted to do because it no longer allows you to feel successful in how you define success in the first place. And a lot of times your mission leaders, how they define success too. So.
No, that's really relatable, what you said there. And
Yeah.
I do think, to your point, like, it's good that your organization, not good, it's critical that your missions, whether it's agency or organization or your supporting church, that whoever it is that is sending you understands that you have kids with special needs, like more than just sees it on paper or has met your family. They understand what that means, because if they're trying to pressure you to attain some type of number ideal that's just not even realistic, I mean, yeah, it just puts an undue pressure on you, on the kids. And like you said, I think it's challenging for anybody anywhere. I think a hard thing for me, I don't know about with you guys, was when our daughter started to get older, because we had two daughters. They're just a year apart. And so when they were younger, they do little kid things. It was still very hard, but I felt the bump against ministry, I think, when she got older, especially when she turned 18. I remember just breaking down and crying. And in one sense, crying for gratitude, because I said she'd never lived that long. So I was just like, God, you're so good. I can't even believe this. This is amazing. And she's healthy. She's strong. She's thriving. And it hit me, we aren't going to be empty nesters. And oh, did I grieve that? So it's this mix of joy and thankfulness and the miracle that our kids are, and this grief at loss of things that other people have. I remember looking at Danny and going, we would have been really good empty nesters. Like, we really like each other. Like, we have a really fun marriage. We make a great team. We would have been great empty nesters. And we got to grieve that together. And still, I would say, grieve that some days. And celebrate having our little buddy with us, our life companion. It's this, I mean, you guys know, it's this weird mix of emotion where you feel everything all at once. Yeah. I want to talk too about siblings. So Bryce and Amanda, you have seven kids. I still have a little in awe of that. Like, props to you guys. That's amazing. I love when you said, Bryce, you want to adopt after we have 6 kids. That was great. So I'd love to talk about the impact on siblings. I know I've noticed the impact it's had on our daughter, the way it shaped her. What was the impact like on your kids having children with special needs?
I feel like ours is a little different because our other kids were all older. And so for the majority of their lives, like our oldest is 18, they didn't have the boys in their lives, So for them, I think it was just the boys changed our lives so much. And I feel like it just changed them so much for the better. Because, I mean, they had grown up on the mission field. And so, they loved serving and they loved giving and just, so many things that I felt like they got to, they learned because they grew up, on the mission field. But once their brothers were born, it was just, I mean, they were older and it's been so neat. 'Cause like our daughter wants to go into nursing because, she's just seen a lot of, helping them and just wants just the medical side of things they've been through. And our little girls, we have 7 and 8-year-old girls, and they tell everyone, I want to adopt 10 kids, 5 with Down syndrome, 5 with not, and because they have autism too. And so they're just like, and I want some to have autism and I want some to, and it's just, they didn't know anything about that before. And they walk into a room, at church or anything. And the first people they go to are people with special needs. And look, Mom, look, there's somebody, can we go sit by that guy? And they would not have had that. I know that. Their hearts, our hearts, none of them were like that before they were born. And I just am so grateful that all of our hearts were changed. So they're again, though, I feel like the boys are very spoiled because of them. They want to just do everything for them. And so that is challenging, but they definitely just, yes, love them so much.
Little mamas over there. That's so great.
Yes.
Yeah, isn't it? Because this makes me think about, you brought up earlier about how, like, you and I were saying we weren't the ones who necessarily sought out kids with special needs when we were younger. But I think what's fun is now we get to have kids where they're the ones, like, your daughters are my daughter, our daughter. Like, they are the ones who go and do that. And so it's a beautiful thing to get to see in your kids something that maybe you didn't have or didn't know. There just wasn't that knowledge. You mentioned that earlier. A lot of people just aren't exposed to it. They don't know what to do with that. Mm-hmm. So what a beautiful thing for our families that our kids get to be raised with that perspective. And then our families, I mean, wherever we're at, whether we're on the mission field, whether we're in our passport country, our families get to be this light to other people. and this opportunity for people to encounter someone with special needs and get normalized and get to see us loving our kids and not feeling shame and not hiding them, but having them just out there living life and celebrating them. It really is, especially in cultures. I mean, I know like ours for sure, where having a child with special needs was an embarrassing thing. And it was a beautiful thing. A missionary actually came down to our church who had worked, two missionaries who had worked with children with special needs. And one of them, they started a ministry for kids with special needs at our church in Peru, which was huge. That did not exist before. And so I think there's so much that we can do. We go on the mission field with one idea, and then God just has all these other ideas, and it's fun to see what he does. I'd love to ask, like, Madonna, if you could sit down with a missionary parent who just found out that their child had special needs, what is one thing that you would want them to hear? What does their heart need to hear?
I think that there's joy in the birth, and joy in the child, to forget that, to be thankful for the child, and then just to know that there's a community out there of people who understand and who can walk alongside them, that can answer questions or just listen. I think that's the biggest thing. I think so many parents just need to hear that there's somebody who can listen and nod their head and understand. They may not have all the answers, but at least they understand the hard and the joy, and like you said, just a whole package of emotions at once.
And where have you been able to find some of those voices, those people to listen to you guys?
Well, fortunately in Taiwan, I think there's a good number of missionary families that have kids with special needs, and the island's small enough that that's one place where I've been able to find is just other parents here on the island. But another one is just, I started a Facebook page for families that have kids with special needs. And there's been some there where we can just say, hey, having a bad day, or kids are resources where somebody's moving somewhere. Does anybody know? And then people jumped in from other countries and said, yes, here's the doctor you need. I'll DM, things just like that, just having that kind of support. I think community, though, on the ground where you're at in the city, trying to build that support system, finding the aunties and the uncles who can kind of come alongside and help and be I think one of the best things is just having someone either come and stay with the child with special needs so that you as a family can go with your other children and do something, whether it's just going for a meal and making it just an easy meal that's quieter, or I don't want to say it, but normal, like a normal meal without an outburst. Just so that you can sit and chat with them. But building that community is really, really important. So,
yes, absolutely. And okay, your Facebook page that you mentioned, I'm reading the minds of listeners going, where is this Facebook page? Is it something that I can join? Is that something that's open?
it's not open, it is private. There's a couple of answers you have to fill out, but it's raising TCKs with special needs on Facebook.
Yeah, let's get a link to that for sure. That's something that I wish that I would have had. I remember doing a lot of Googling and searching when I first went down. I couldn't find anything like that. So I just love you guys. And that's why we're talking about this today. 'Cause the fact that there's more supports than there used to be is it's significant. It's not as lonely as it was before. And in a group like yours, you can kind of recognize some of those global themes that we all deal with everywhere. And then maybe find parents in your community who have also children with special needs where you can bond together, laugh together, cry together, watch each other's kids together, do all some of those things. Because it's you really can't do it alone. You really can't do it alone. How about you guys? Amanda, Bryce, is there a piece of encouragement that you would love to offer a missionary parent of a child with special needs?
Well, one thing that comes to mind is, the number one thing that we heard, when Rusk was born was, whether it's in the church or was outside the church, was, I'm sorry, mourn it. There's like a death that happened, and it's very easy to like kind of take that in. And so one of the things is to celebrate, celebrate your child. Don't see it as like, this is a death, this is a beautiful life. And And so one of the things is we just didn't recognize some of that, and so to celebrate the community piece was was absolutely essential. Um, and one of the things that we found was like we didn't really have a whole lot of community where we lived on the field, but thankfully, just a lot of resources outside. So definitely try to find a lot of that. But
I think too, our church, we had, church support, and they were amazing. Like I remember feeling like, well, where we were living, they didn't offer therapies, and everyone was writing saying, "You've got to move back. You've got to get them into therapy. You've got to do this." And
mm,
we had someone in the church that was like, "Hey, um, my son has that too, and so these are the things that helped, him learn to drink and eat." And they just sent a box of supplies down, and
Wow.
then the same church was like, "Hey, there's this lady that does." Speech therapy, and we're going to gift that she can do it online for you guys. And so, I mean, I think sometimes the church might not think of that, but this church did. We didn't even have to ask for it. I didn't even know about that. And so just,
mm,
you know, I think if, even saying it, I mean, now there's so many online therapies but I think just saying, hey, even like, Uvi had talked earlier about, being honest and, like letting the church know, hey, or, supporters, this is, something, and they can pray about. Maybe there's somebody in the churches or supporters that could be able to help with those, if that's something you're wanting or, yeah.
Yeah, God can do miraculous things. He really can. I mean, it's a miracle that gets us all in the field to begin with. But then
Yes.
once we're there, like if we're supposed to be there, he will make a way. And there's seasons where it's a long season of waiting. But I mean, we've got crazy stories of God helping us like find this school for kids with special needs, like 2 minutes from our house. And then I remember we started a missionary internship, and one of the interns he sent down just happened to be a former special ed teacher who helped me, get together a whole homeschool curriculum when we were transitioning her out of the school when she'd outgrown it. I mean, it was stuff that like didn't even make sense. And the special needs
Yeah.
ministry that started. And I know everyone's journey is different. And so, somebody might be listening and going, well, that's not my journey. And I
Yeah.
get that. Everyone's journey is different. And I'm not saying it was easy by any means for us. There were also seasons where we had no one and we were trying to figure things out, and it was really rocky. But there are times where God, sure, he might call a family off the field, because a child needs a service in another country. And if that's your situation, like,
That's
okay, then God is going to make a way for that too. And if you're supposed to be on the field, we believe he'll make a way. But he calls families. And so if he's called you there, and you both have peace about that as parents, and we believe with you, all 5 of us believe with you that God will help you find the resources you need. We do have to fight for them, I have to say. Sometimes, Amanda, like beautifully, like you said, God will just send people or do things, and you're like, oh, what a grace. And then other times, I remember my husband was knocking on doors in a park because somebody told him there was a school in a park, and he knocked on doors until he found the door of the school. And that really is symbolized, I think, life for us there. It's knocking on doors sometimes until your knuckles are bloody. And then sometimes it is a gift straight from heaven that falls in your lap, and you're just like, this is a grace. I needed this. Thank you, Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
But man, it's a journey unlike any others, and it's a journey that only those of us in the special club fully will ever understand. So thank you guys for the beautiful job that you do with Matea, with Rusk, with Sutter. You guys are beautiful parents and such an inspiration, I know, to everybody who's listening. And I did want to mention, Uva and Madonna, you have a ministry for these families. Could you mention that quickly just for people who might want to find out more?
Right. So our organization is called Taiwan Sunshine, and our goal is to support and encourage families that have kids with special needs. So our focus is really on the family. I feel like a lot of ministry is to the kids with special needs, but I think it's so important that we also see how we can encourage the family and the parents and the grandparents, whoever the primary caregivers are behind that. And so we work primarily in Taiwan, but we're starting to expand out a little bit into other parts of Eastern Asia and the Pacific Rim, the Asia side of the Pacific. Yeah, do a lot of sports, community projects, family things, just trying to connect with parents and trying to encourage them. And then our ultimate goal is trying to connect them to healthy churches so that a lot of that support can be ongoing and local instead of through a nonprofit organization to actually see if we can get churches to take this on.
Hey, I like the idea of churches taking this on. It's an important
Yes.
thing. That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
And Bryce and Amanda, you guys are a blast to follow on Instagram with your 7 kids and all of their adventures. Enjoy it so much. You guys, thank you again for coming on today, for sharing some of your stories, for being vulnerable, for offering some hope, and then also just like some real feelings that I think people can connect with. So appreciate you guys, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you
for having us.
Thank
For
you.
having us.
Hey, missionary friends, we are so glad you joined us today. Make sure to subscribe to our channel so you'll be the first to know when a new episode drops. And click like and comment below. We love hearing what's resonating with you and what you'd like to hear more of.